thank you so much. Certainly, thank you all for inviting me here. Of course, when I passed and I said, "Oh, I know what NutriCycle is," right? But a lot of people may not know what you all do. It's a kind of novel concept to have coffee and bikes, but you know, we can accept the coffee and bike idea. I also really appreciate my husband, Aaron Ammons, who brought me here tonight. Y'all clap for Aaron. And my staff here that are always here to help you all. So even if we don't have the answer tonight, we are always happy to get the answer for you, which is Andrea Porter, who's sitting right here in the front. You can raise your hand. And Jenna Sakinius, who's on the iPhone there, who helps with my comms team. She's a communications legislative assistant. And I am Carol Ammons, and I have been in the General Assembly for 5 years. I'm going into my 6th year, which is my 3rd term. Just for people who may not understand how the General Assembly works, we run every 2 years, but I consistently work in the community, so I don't worry too much about campaigning. I welcome any kind of questions from any area about any legislative work that we do, or things that you want us to do that we're not doing. We welcome those things. I just encourage you that if you have an idea, don't think it doesn't work. Just reach out to us and say, what if we changed this thing? I'll share with you all that just about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, Aaron, some workers got together and said that they want to change the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And people thought that was insane. SEIU was leading the effort. And I remember our organizing effort at the corner of Kirby and Neal Street. And it was a few of us straggly folk coming out there for SEIU saying we want to change the minimum wage to $15. And a lot of people kind of went by and they blew, and some people thought we was absolutely crazy about that. But 5 years later, we have changed the minimum wage, not only in the state of Illinois, but we've changed it in many, many cities and states across this nation. And the federal government just voted this week to change it nationwide. So if you don't think grassroots activists work, I am here to tell you that it does. I also want to tell you that I am not the expert on marijuana. I have never been the expert on marijuana. I have very little experience. However, I have a lot of really great people around me who, along the way, the process of getting Illinois to where we really should have been a long time ago, but we had to walk a certain path in a certain way to get here. We had a lot of great activists that came to me and other members of the General Assembly to educate us about the importance of not only changing the law in Illinois from the standpoint of criminal justice reform, but also from the standpoint of economic equity and justice, to change that law and to allow people to consume recreational. I'll tell you what the bill does. I'll tell you what it doesn't do, because the fine print is as important as the big print. And I'll tell you what I believe in my crystal ball that we have to do in the future to really continue to move to a more progressive, even though we're probably the most progressive law in the country right now. But we want to go further than where we are right now, because we have a lot of things that are still unanswered. So if you ask me one of those unanswered questions, Andrea is going to write them down for you, and we will continue to work through the process to make sure that you get them. I also want you to know that if I don't have your information, meaning I don't have your email, and I can't communicate with you, that's not a good thing. So before you leave, if you also want to receive communication from me or to send me communications, we want to make sure that we get your email as well, so that we can continue to walk on this tread as we go. As I mentioned before, the bill, of course, just passed. Let me just start with the and work our way back. This law was probably one of the most complicated things I have ever worked on, because, again, there were many facets of the bill that and many stakeholders that were in the conversation from the very beginning to the end. And most of us don't think about what the circuit clerk's office has to do with marijuana legislation, or what the mayor's office has to do with marijuana legislation. But on every single level, there are local government participants on how the bill and the law rolls out in those local cities. Some cities are determining whether they want to be a part of it, like just a little bit east of us. Their city council in some of the smaller towns are trying to decide if they want to be a part of the marijuana law. The law is written in a way that if a city or village or town says that they are not going to allow dispensaries in those communities, they will not benefit from the state tax revenue that comes. That's the trade-off. And so people need to understand that if there's revenue generated, and there will be revenue generated from the tax and sale of legal marijuana in the state of Illinois, every city and village will not benefit from that based on their local policies. They get to determine that because in many cases they're home rule. So right now the cannabis purchasing is only medical until the bill becomes fully enacted, which is January 1st of 2020. We have dispensaries and licensing happening right now. And so I'm going to pick up this little piece of paper because this is the latest of the latest as far as how implementation is going to go. Let me just let you know that there are multiple points of entry because we have the Department of Agriculture if you're going to grow. So assuming you got 10 acres out east somewhere and you want to grow yourself, there are regulations for growers. If you want to be a craft brewer, like craft brewer of coffee, beer. If you want to be a craft brewer, there's licensing for craft brewers. What if you just want to transport? There's a license for transporting. So there are different levels of licensing that you have to be involved in, and I can't answer every one here, but I'm always happy to help you in your particular interest. Whether you just want to be a consumer, that's one thing. You should absolutely know what consuming means in the legal space now. If you want to be a small business owner, we can help you figure that out, but we could also help those who want to be larger growers. You have farmland somewhere and you're interested in that as well. So 30 grams of raw cannabis can be purchased as of January 1st by any 21-year older person. So if you're 21 years and older, just like Tobacco 21, you can purchase legally from a dispensary. We have 2 in this area. We'll probably see a few more pop up. Based on the city of Champaign and the city of Urbana, they still get to determine how many dispensaries will be in their city limits, but we will have additional dispensaries. Cannabis-infused products and products containing no more than 500 milligrams of THC and 5 grams of cannabis product in concentrated form, meaning the liquids, you can have them as of January 1st legally. As long as it's 30 grams or less, 500 grams or less on the THC, and it's in the concentrated form of 5 grams of cannabis or less. Now, what does the or more mean? There is an or more. If you have more than that in your possession January 1st, 2020, is that legal? That is not legal. Unless you have a license as a business owner, meaning that you've hired me and I am transporting for your dispensary from one place to another by legal means. I have a license, I have a certificate to do that transport. That is legal. But if you're simply a consumer and you have 31 grams or more, there are some criminal penalties attached to that. That's the portion that I disagree with, just for the record. House Bill 1438 brings in what we consider the expungement work. So part of my struggle along the way of trying to write the bill, and we were directly involved in the construction of the expungement and the equity provisions of this bill. The social equity provisions were very critical to making sure that communities across the country who have really been more devastated by policing around drugs and drug-related offenses, we wanted to make sure that those communities had some kind of way to repair themselves as well as to access this new industry. Similar to the gold rush, if we think about the gold rush, people say, oh, you can find gold if you go out west, and people are looking for opportunity for their families. They pack up their wagons and they head out west. And whatever you find in that time, you could keep. In this case, if you want to be in this industry, there are regulatory means by which to get into the industry, and some of those things may not apply. So we want to make sure that there was ways by which you can get in. So let me kind of go over the expungement part of this, because the expungement is important to people who may want to be in the industry. You can be in the industry if you have a past conviction. You can. If you have a misdemeanor or a felony related to drug selling or drug possession, you can still be in the industry the way the bill has been written, which is a positive thing, and we really fought hard for that. The governor also put in place, so we have automatic expungement. So if you have any conviction or any misdemeanor that was related to marijuana when you were in college and you want to get that expunged, there is a provision for automatic expungement in this bill. So if it was 30 grams or less, you don't have to do anything for that expungement to take place. There's a very complicated but long process by which the state police is going to look up every single record that they have for any kind of marijuana related offense that you may have had before, and they will issue the automatic expungement as long as it's under 30 grams. That's automatic. If it is over 30 grams, but you are still entitled to expungement, you have to initiate that expungement yourself, which is clemency, and the governor has made a commitment to offer clemencies to people who may have 31 grams or more of an offense related to marijuana. So if your offense is under 30 grams, you don't have to do anything. If it's over 30 grams, you have to actually petition the court for expungement. I am not the expert on expungements. I think we do have one in this room and maybe others, but the clerk here can certainly help anyone who may need to petition for expungement. We have an expungement summit every single year. This year's summit is October 5th. That's right, I should know that. It's October 5th. And if you want to get into that process of expungement, just let Andrea know. She will tell you how to get that started. So I wanted to make sure that we are on the same page. Under 30 grams, you don't have to do anything for expungement. You also can, on your possession, January 1st, 2020, you can have less than 30 grams on your possession, and there is no criminal penalty in relationship to that, okay? So I want to make sure we go slowly so people understand exactly what this means. We talked about the entrepreneurship part of this. Part of the entrepreneurship, and this is for communities who have been impacted largely by the war on drugs, is for communities of color who really have either their family members or themselves had some kind of conviction in relationship to the war on drugs. So the social equity program provides benefits directly to those who have suffered because of the war on cannabis at any point. Not only does the bill 14838, if you want to ever read the bill, it's 900 pages. I recommend it. 1438 removes convictions through expungement. It specifically provides additional points for business applicants, access to financial resources for startup costs. You don't already have to be in business. So if you want to start that brownie business you always wanted to do, you don't have to have your own business already. You can get involved in this industry right now as a startup business. It's open to everyone at that point. And resources to communities that were hardest hit from the war on drugs or war on cannabis also have, this is what we call those opportunity zones. I would say if we were looking at Champaign-Urbana as where the opportunity zones are in Champaign-Urbana by zip code, we would look at North Champaign, we would look at Northwest Urbana, right? So we're talking about those places where your arrests, they do it by arrest. The number of arrests really totally coincides with those opportunity zones, okay? So let's talk about how it works. A social equity applicant is a business whose ownership or staff has been directly impacted by the war on cannabis. These are people who have either been arrested or convicted on a cannabis-related offense, or a person who has strong ties to a community that has been disproportionately impacted by poverty and cannabis drug-related law enforcement. Such a business must be owned by 51% or more of those who qualify for businesses with 10 or more staff members that come from that opportunity zone that I described. That's 51% of their workers. So people with felony convictions, misdemeanors, or any other can also work in the industry. We worked hard to make sure that people were not locked out of this new market so that people would have an opportunity. And we know a lot of folk who have changed their lives and turned their lives around, but for whatever reason, there's still barriers before them to enter into different spaces and professional licenses and things of that nature. And we've been working to try to remove those. And we want to make sure this bill went out the door with them in there. So we didn't want to send it out the door and then do it on the back end. We wanted it to be in the bill when the bill went out the door. So the social equity applicant can qualify for assistance in various ways. And this is also something that we really worked hard on. Applicants for business licenses that qualify as social equity applicants will receive additional points on the application in the scoring system. Now, this was critical. I think I argued this until May 31st. The critical part about the points. So in many application processes, they are going to rank them based on a point system. If you are a diverse candidate, if you are a person from one of those opportunity zones, or you yourself may have had a misdemeanor or drug-related conviction, and you qualify for that expungement, you want to start this business up, we wanted to make sure that the equity points gave you a real advantage to getting the license, because the licensing portion of this is extremely competitive. And so the social equity points are 35% of the application itself. So that gives the motivation. So if we want to go into business and we are both in the considered minority communities and I come from the opportunity zone, right, that gives us additional points over large, big corporations that have all the money. And that was important for us to make sure that small communities and people can participate. Because that is, as we looked across the country in Colorado and California and Connecticut and up north of us, even though there were social equity stuff, the provisions did not weigh heavily on the things that I just named on the social equity. We wanted them to weigh out heavily on the application part of this process. The Cannabis Business Development Fund, which every applicant is going to put into that fund, so that those smaller startups could have some money to access to start up your business. The Cannabis Business Development Fund will provide financial resources for business startups, which can be used to offset licensing fees or used to lower interest rates of your loan. The fund will start with $12 million from the fund as soon as July 1. Now, this is important because there are dispensaries that are already open. Those dispensaries automatically get a license. That's correct. But to get that license, they have to pay to this fund. So that fund is not taxpayer funded. There's no increase of taxes that's going to go into that fund. That fund is going to come from the applicants themselves who are already in the industry market. They are going to seed small women-owned businesses, small businesses in minority communities, and other people who may be in that disenfranchised business opportunity zone. That money seeds them. And that's a very important part of this process, so that the big giants, and there are only a few of them in the state, a handful of large companies that are in the state of Illinois currently, those companies will be helping to incubate. And that was something that Governor Pritzker really wanted, as he's an incubator himself. He wanted to make sure there was a fund to incubate small businesses, minority businesses, women-owned businesses. That was really important to him. So that $12 million will be there as soon as possible after July 1. And additional early fees will be transferred into it. So any fees that we are getting, and we already have those large companies here, those fees are going into this fund so that these funds can be used to incubate smaller businesses. They anticipated to grow to about $30 million. I would probably suspect it may go a little beyond $30 million, and it's it actually is going to be self-perpetuating, because every single year that we have to renew licenses and fees, part of the funds go into that fund. We also argued for educational research to be part of this bill. I really wanted the four-year institutions to be a part because, of course, we have this massive school of agriculture here at the University of Illinois. But we ended up going with community colleges, and this is why. The federal government, who helps to fund your universities, still has it as an illegal substance. So it puts those universities at jeopardy if they then become an institution that, grows and teaches cultivation and other business practices around marijuana, why it's still illegal at the federal level. Just a sidebar, thank you all for coming, because I know that right now there's a presidential debate going on. And so I feel honored that you're even here. But at the same time, we hope those presidential candidates certainly will move to get this out of the schedule. That is important for some of the other things that I'll share with you before you go to questions and answer. The local colleges can obtain a license for training programs to help residents prepare for the cannabis industry and related jobs. I am really pushing for Parkland to be one of them because it's tied to our agricultural school here. And if we can do it through our 2-year college, that would be a very, very good thing for our area. The 3-year program, which is called Restore, Reinvest, and Renew program, will allow community groups to develop programs to benefit disadvantaged communities through your community colleges. And that is a really great step forward. And hopefully those community colleges, again, I'm advocating for Parkland to be one of those, that those community colleges will then teach other small incubators, because they have a business development center here at Parkland already. And the goal is that if you go out of here and say, I want to start my bakery, and call it wherever you want to call it around marijuana and its uses, then you should be able to go and get business advice from Parkland College, who's also teaching these courses, which is a natural partnership here. The Department of Agriculture and the Community College Board will create up to 8 pilot programs to train students to work in the legal cannabis industry. At least 5 of the 8 must be schools in which at least 50% of the students are low income. Again, we have to advocate because we want to geographically represent these programs throughout the state. I'm sure we can find 8 community colleges in the city of Chicago alone with 50% of their population. So here's our advocacy again at the state level to say, yes, you could possibly put all 8 of them in Chicago, but why don't you spread them out geographically throughout the state and make sure that Central Illinois and Southern Illinois, who has these community colleges as well and are agriculturally based, that we can have those programs also throughout the state. So let's talk a little bit about the businesses. The following types of cannabis business licenses will be issued. There's a dispensary license I mentioned earlier, provides cannabis products to adult consumers. We have 2 of them already, one on South Neal Street, one in Urbana on Broadway. Those 2 dispensaries are already operational, and they can serve people currently that have medical cards. They cannot serve people who are not on the medical program currently. Once January 1st hits, they will be able to serve anyone that's over 21. Infusers infuses products such as edibles with cannabis extracts, like you might want to open up that bakery or add one onto the bike shop over here. Transporters, if you have a transportation business, which is a very big industry. Let's think about the transportation again. You can start a transportation business because those companies, those folks out in the rural who's going to grow has to get that product to the dispensaries. And the transportation is a specific kind of license that you can transport from the grower to the dispensary. And it's very important because it's a tracking mechanism from seed to sale. And it's important that the transporters are those that the companies can depend on to make sure that product gets from that grower to that dispensary. And the state of Illinois is going to track this thing, I would say something, but I'm going to say just with a vengeance. How about that? With a vengeance. There's money that is in this budget that goes to law enforcement for this purpose, so just so you know. The craft grower can grow between 5,000 and 14,000 square feet of canopy space and may be separately licensed as an infuser and a dispensary at the same facility. Assuming that this building is it, you could have the grow there, and you can have the dispensary here, and you can have the craft next door. The square footage is what's determining the level of the license. So you can grow inside, of course. Again, I'm not the expert on growing, so please don't ask me any questions about growing. But you can based on the square footage when you apply for your license. A cultivation center can grow up to 210,000 square feet of canopy space. Of course, indoor canopy space. Now, this is an expansion of the licensing from what initially happened under the medical. Under the medical, unless you had $3 million, you were not getting into that industry. we've tried to expand this so that you could find different entry points into the industry if you so chose to do that. So we're going to talk about taxes a minute. Fun subject. Thought he would like that to text me. So taxes at the wholesale level, cannabis products will be subject to a 7% tax when they are sold by the cultivation centers or the craft growers. And you'll see this if you have a medical card, you already see this, right? If you go to a dispensary, it tells you it literally breaks out all the taxes so that you can see where they all go. I would imagine the Department of Revenue, who regulates this portion of it, they will also have to contend with local taxation because there will also be a local taxation on it. But the bill is written in a way to make sure that we are not taxing people out of the market, right? That was a big thing that happened in Colorado and California, and they were very concerned that so much of the taxes was there that people still continue to grow on their own and therefore impact the industry. Let's talk about homegrown for a minute. If you have a medical license, you can grow up to 5 plants even after January 1. Now, I'm going to say that again. You have to have a medical license even after January 1 to grow up to 5 plants. And that's important for people to understand that even though there is adult consumption after January 1, unless you have a medical license as a patient, you cannot grow on your own. I'm just telling you, don't tell me what you're doing right now. But I hope that we will change that. My bill allowed you to grow more than 5 plants, and we didn't separate it by medical or recreation. This bill only has it for medical card holders up to 5 plants. And it is important that you understand that as of January 1st, even if you are adult consuming, you still cannot grow on your own without a medical card. Okay. Somebody gonna leave and the police gonna pull them over. What you doing with those plants? Well, Carol said it was legal. We videotaping this. Just so we know, medical card up to 5 plants. Up to 5 plants, okay? At the retail level, Illinois has taken a unique approach. Rather than blanket taxes for all cannabis products, Illinois will charge a tax rate based on the relative potency of the cannabis and the type of product. Don't ask me any questions about potency. The more concentrated THC is, the higher the tax rate. So that's very complicated, but just an example of that is 10% tax will apply to cannabis flower products with less than 35% THC. 20% tax will apply to products infused with cannabis or edible products. The brownie lady, 20% tax on that. 25% tax will apply to any product with a THC concentration higher than 35%. I can't even answer why that's based that way. That was the Department of Revenue. That's what they did. I would imagine other states probably do a similar thing. But this is one of those things that the tax rate will vary based on the product that you have. If you're interested in how the revenue will be distributed, that is my last little talking point here that I will share with you. Part of this whole thing as to why we needed to legalize is because it made sense, right? It just simply makes sense. Prohibition didn't work, it doesn't work, and we needed to legalize. That's one good reason why we did. The other thing is that we had this really unfair criminal justice system that was also working, that would lock up more black and brown folks for the same thing that everybody else had, but the outcome on the criminal justice side was not the same. I don't think anybody should be locked up for any drug. Actually, I don't think anyone should be locked up for any drug. It's a public health issue. It is not a criminal justice one. So if you're addicted to meth, if you're addicted to opioids, if you're addicted, I don't think you should be in prison. I think you should be in a facility, a hospital of public health. That's my position on all drugs. But in this case, marijuana was not being applied fairly. So we needed to do that. But we also knew that what we learned from our mentor many, many moons ago, when we had our very first conversation on marijuana legalization on this campus with Urbana Champaign Normal in 2000 and 4 or 5, something like that. We started this walk a long time ago because we knew even then that the best course of action to address the criminal justice piece, to address the unfair application, and to address the tax and regulation issue that we had was to legalize it. And so by doing so, we will fund public education and safety campaigns. We will also do local government distributive, meaning we'll send money back to local governments that participate, and they will be able to do other things in their cities, towns, and villages. We are investing in the social equity in a real, measurable, and tangible way. And we might be able to even pay the bills of the state of Illinois. That is my presentation. Thank you so much. Go ahead. I'm open.
When it comes to transport, for the transportation portion of it, such as you said, Indiana is not part of this plan yet. Would it be a situation? Would someone find themselves in a situation where if I have the trucking business and I'm transporting and I have to go through Indiana and I happen to get stopped, would they be able to arrest me or whoever I have driving my truck? And would they be able to confiscate the product that I have?
Without me acting as if I'm law enforcement, my logical answer would be because our neighboring state is not legal, then I would answer and say yes. You could, and we're trying to work around the whole idea. We cannot bring marijuana in from any other state, so that's not going to happen. So if you're transporting from Illinois to Indiana, you're already breaking the law. Or if you're going through Indiana from some dispensary, right, some grower somewhere else, you're already breaking the law. It has to come within the borders of the state of Illinois. So we hope that no one's transporting across state lines. It is from, southern Illinois to Chicago dispensary, right? That's really what the transportation should be until all the states or the federal government steps in and really deals with this interstate commerce issue. That will still be illegal. And that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. Hi, Courtney.
How are jobs going to handle this? So now jobs at drug screen, are they no longer, since this is now legal, will they no longer be screening for that drug?
The answer is right now, according to the law, employers still have the right to really enforce the same drug related policies that they currently have. So whether it comes to alcohol consumption or any kind of impairment on the job, they still have the exact same right to implement those policies. There was a law that just passed Nevada, I want to say Aaron sent to me, that really is challenging the HR perspective. We have a long way to go before we get enough into the court system to really deal with this question. We are looking at legislation that I'll probably try to introduce in the spring to even get this into the, we got to get it into the queue. And the way we get it into the queue is we introduce legislation. And so I am looking at the Nevada law that just passed, and I think their governor signed it. And we're going to see what their HR policies in relationship to marijuana and employment are, and see how we can kind of align ourselves with what Nevada has done. Okay, can I come back to you, and I'll go to our friend in blue.
So, as a liquor license holder, this could potentially cause a little bit of an issue with us. Are people going to be allowed to smoke marijuana in our business where we also serve alcohol? They're going to be able to smoke marijuana in all public places? How's that going to work?
There is no public consumption in this bill. You cannot, like our cigar shop right here on Neal Street in University, you cannot smoke in a hookah lounge or any kind of establishment under this bill. That was, again, a question that we attempted to work on. But again, in passing legislation, there is some negotiation that you have to have. And one of the things that did not get in there was the public consumption. And I would imagine in a few years that you'll see, as the states come on board in the Midwestern region, you'll see some changes in the law, which is what I meant by us introducing some additional things, right? We got to deal with the HR questions. We got to deal with public consumption, like California had to do, and deal with public consumption. But right now, we cannot sit here and smoke in this building. and then leave out because there's no public consumption.
So really only private residences.
Correct. Not in cars. Let's talk about DUI. I mean, now I feel like a mama, right? We want to be careful because, again, there are funds in this to teach law enforcement how to recognize and test for impairment. It is an important thing. We don't want people driving high on a road and causing accidents and killing people in cars. And so we have to be very, very careful about buzz driving. Is that what they call buzz driving? We want to really be careful about that. But there are dollars that have been put in for law enforcement to train and to figure out the science behind the testing portion of that. I saw in the numbers from Colorado that the arrests went down, meaning the possession arrests went down, but DUIs went up. And that is a very big concern. That was always a concern for me around the DUI question. DUIs are, I don't know, don't raise your hand if you got one. That's not a good thing because it will cause you to lose your job. Of course, you can lose your vehicle, and it has its own social implications. And so we are just really encouraging people, if you're going to smoke recreationally, you're going to eat those brownies, stay at home. Stay at home. Be safe. Keep the roads safe. Make sure that people are not driving under the influence. And even if the science, which it has not caught up yet with the law, it will catch up with the law to measure impairment. And so that's a very, very important part of this process, is that we're very careful about DUI and making sure that you're not putting yourself in jeopardy. Okay. Yes, I'll come back to you.
Go back to him.
Okay, I'm going back. Brian told me to go back to you. I'm going back to you.
First, let me say thank you for coming to speak to us. I meant to say that before. Understanding that there's a medical grade of marijuana that's out there, that these dispensaries in town and other places that are able to sell that can do so, is there conversation about eventually possibly insurance covering that at all?
You know, we did talk a little bit in our work group about the question of insurance as medicine. Again, we just don't have enough research. We don't have a research institution that's doing that work yet. Until the federal government gets on board, it's going to be very hard for us to fund research like the USDA funds research. And right now we can't get dollars for marijuana funding and medicinal purposes. And so there are many books out there that suggest certain things, but there's no real authority on the research there. And we don't have it in the state of Illinois. So we got a little ways to go when it comes to whether insurance will cover the access point. Now, I remember having a call from a good friend of ours, actually, who has a significant back injury, and he's older. And he called us on the phone. We was on the radio one day, and he called us up and said he appreciate being able to grow his own because he has a medicinal license. But it's hard to do, right? You can't just, I'm thinking I can grow it like basil. You can't grow it like basil. So that's not easy to do. So he said the problem he has, even with his medicinal card, is that the cost is too high. And so that is a real significant problem for those who believe, and I'm becoming more of a believer, that it has its great medicinal purposes, but there's very little research around it that can be done. And because there's not enough competition, you will see the prices go down when you start seeing other dispensaries go up, which is a good thing for us as consumers. But the reality is we just don't have enough work around the area to talk about the insurance part of this, which is a whole nother discussion. Yeah. I'll come back to Brian, then I'm gonna come back to Courtney.
He had actually dealt with her. I just knew you were going to do it.
Just a question for you.
So no, it's close. So as a cancer patient, I know what the cost is for my medicinal card, and I know I can't do that. And I know that it's not. It's not something that I probably would do if I could afford it, but you know what? I'd love to have the option. And that's what I was wondering in the zones that are going around that, you know, that you're looking at? Are the prices in the zones varying? Because quite honestly, right now, certain zones you're gonna be able to have where people can pay with no problem, and certain zones are gonna not be able to pay.
So
For-
let me-
for a
yeah,
medical
I'll follow
card.
you. So medical, under the law that it will be effective January 1st, medical patients will get lesser cost. So that's the first thing. So if you have a medical card, your cost will be different than a recreational user. Okay. The opportunity zones are really about the business locations. It has very little to do with with patients or recreation consumers. It has everything to do with the business side of that. We hope that what we'll see, and I think in California, because there's so many, or in Las Vegas, there's so many, the costs in those places are way less than what we're experiencing here in Illinois for our dispensaries. But we can't just get online and order from California, right? Because then it's illegal. So we hope that we will probably experience the same thing that is being experienced in the other states, that you, with more competition, of course, natural, there will be the drop in prices. Yeah. Yes, sir, Mr. Clerk, absolutely.
I just wanted to ask, you said 30 grams or less at one point, then you said less than 30 grams, and there's a difference between 30 grams or less than 30 grams. So I wanted you to clarify what the deal
It's
is.
30 grams or less. So in 29, 25, 26, anything below that 30 gram threshold, you're legally able to carry, but you cannot open consume. So if I bought some beer from your establishment and I was going to take that beer home, I can't sit in the car and drink it because the beer is legal. I can put that beer unopened in my car and I can transport it home. And even if the police pull me over, it is legal for me to have that beer in my car. It would be the same thing with the 30 grams or less. As long as it is not opened. And there are some laws that I have not seen come out as far as the procedure matter of the dispensaries. But if you go to a dispensary and I bought a drink or beer with marijuana infusion in it, it is packaged in a certain way and it's also bagged. When you leave out that dispensary, they have to follow a certain, Department of Agriculture regulates that. So you have to follow a certain kind of carry as well. And that closed seal is important in your car while you transport. As long as it's 30 grams or less. And not across Indiana. So don't go to Indiana for cheaper cigarettes and no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yes, ma'am.
Wondering, are the current dispensaries, are they profitable? Are they making money, or what is, so they are making?
They are making money, but there was a complaint that we had received on the medical side because when it first started, there wasn't enough symptoms that qualified, right? Or diagnoses. Thank you. It wasn't enough of them that was qualifying illnesses in order for you to get a medical card. Since 2015, of course, we've greatly expanded that. We've also included PTSD, which is a very significant issue. We got MS, we got arthritis, we got significant pain, chronic pain. So there's a real huge expansion on the type of illnesses that will qualify for a medical card. The problem that we've run into is that we don't have enough physicians that are willing to prescribe, to do and we can't make them. So that's just one of the things. But there is a list of doctors who will see you and will prescribe. So because there are dispensaries in Springfield, there's dispensaries everywhere, there are certain doctors who will see a patient and look at your medical history and see if you have a qualifying condition. And by virtue of that qualifying condition, they will make the application to the state, which is how you get your medical license in the first place.
Can I just follow up on her question? Is it a federal issue with the doctors?
Champaign County Healthcare Consumer, help me out. I don't even know what their issue is. Some people have personal issues, but
It's usually a personal issue.
they have personal issues.
We have found out that it's not a policy, so it's not like a hospital policy.
Yeah, it's not hospital.
Unless it's maybe like a religious hospital, that could be a thing. And then the the workaround that now is that these dispensaries have their own physicians. So I think they got rid of the established physician rule. So it used to be that you had to have your physician for X number of years, and if you didn't have that time, then they wouldn't approve it. Now I think they've worked around that, so as long as you have a physician, which I think if you go to NewMed or Phoenix, like they have their own physicians that you can see, they do a consultation, and then they can, I think it's a higher fee that you might pay, but they can prescribe that, so you can have access. You wait the 60 to 90 day, and then you can pretty much start going there.
See, I didn't even know that. So one of my colleagues, Bob Morgan, is former director under Governor Quinn, and they started working on the original marijuana medical part of this process, and it was very restrictive from the beginning. It was very restrictive at the beginning, and they've again worked. They just passed that to remove the medical question. They've done several things on the dispensary. They added social equity into the medical side of the business. And so they've also tried to change the medical program so that people with those conditions did not have such hurdles to try to at least get access, even while the research is still out. A lot of people really feel that the different strands, whatever it is that they found, actually works for them and is certainly cheaper and has less side effects than some of the prescription meds that people really cannot afford, which is a whole nother conversation. I'm always happy to talk about pharmaceuticals if you want to invite me back. But the cost of meds are so high that people just cannot afford them. And that is a significant American problem that we need to address. Yes, ma'am.
As an alcohol server, you got to take training and you're restricted to who you can serve, you can't overserve, and you get training on that. Now the symptoms of somebody being very intoxicated are kind of the opposite of somebody being high on weed, right? So how do you react as a server, or how do we know how to tell, or is there any legislation that
How to tell if a person is under the influence?
Yes, so if somebody comes into the bar, he's not drunk, but something's going on, can I still serve?
Yeah, that's still, the jury's out on that. You know, I don't believe, and I don't recall in any of our discussions where there was a requirement for any business owner to determine whether a person was under the influence or not, under marijuana. There's just no requirement for that, and I'm almost certain that there is no requirement for there to be an additional training. Is there medical training? I don't think so. Around, because the responses are so different between those two things. That was not a part of our discussion, and as we negotiated the bill, we did not have any discussion about whether people who are bar owners, liquor owners, any kind of liquor establishment has any obligation to identify a person who might have marijuana in their system. It's just, that would be very complicated to even regulate. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
My question's surrounding cannabis tourism.
Cannabis.
Like tourism.
Tourism,
Will,
okay.
adults from surrounding states with out-of-state licenses be able to come into the state and purchase and consume within the state? Or is it only available to Illinois residents?
In Illinois, it's available to whomever in Illinois, as long as the consumption is in Illinois after January 1st and they're 21 or older. So yes, I would imagine there will be, we expect that there's a lot of businesses that grow out of an industry, and this is an agricultural one, so there will be a lot of points of entry, but also people who come to Chicago, Illinois, just like when we go to Vegas, as long as you're consuming in the state of Illinois, that you don't have any worries about that, but you take your chances if you try to take it across state lines. Yes, sir.
And I'm sure you got this question a couple weeks ago, but for the orders that for like sealing or expunging, if they're automatic for expunging. Some judges don't believe the automatic expunging, and will tell us that we have to essentially provide them an order. And tomorrow I'm sending up the order for the July 1st expungements. That I don't believe the judge, should be able to tell us to produce an order for something that the state legislature says an automatic expungement.
You don't have to if it's under 30 grams. So the state
Correct.
police is going to take care of that portion. So they're going to send.
On our side, we still have to take care,
But they changed it in state law. So
Yes,
for 30 grams or less, the judges can't stop that expungement. For 30 grams or more, it still has to be petitioned, and that is really going to be up to that local to determine whether that person will get that expungement based on expungement law, right?
and they should based on.
Just depends on what it was. Yeah.
But he's saying that, did you say, Brian, that even the automatic ones, they're saying they're going to
The automatic ones, yes, and then so the automatic ones, they still make me or someone in my office or in our office will have to create an order to send up for them to sign.
Yeah, they have to sign.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
but I don't think it's, like you said, it's 910 pages, and I wasn't reading that. But I didn't see where it said that we had to send an order to the judge for it to be legal, because some places, and I don't know when it started, but some places will worry about having that order on hand.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, as soon as that order is signed, there's no file that I have, so you can't come in the circuit clerk's office and grab it.
Right.
So as far as that's concerned, that's not gonna be a problem. But if there are judges in other counties, in fact, I know that there are, because they're already talking about it, that they're going to allow someone to see someone's record even before it's expunged, and they're running queries out of their case management groups to make sure they get all of the,
Well, we will have some difficulty in some spaces that we'll have to address. The reason why the governor wanted to do this 700,000 by virtue of automatic and clemency, because his will supersede.
That's right, I forgot about that.
The clemency portion will supersede, and that's important because you raise a good point. Now, will we have some fights with some people? Will people still call their state rep office and say, I am eligible for this, but I can't get this? We will have to get involved to help, which is what we do.
Yep.
And we'll have to contact the state police and go from there. I hope we don't have as many of them. We did have this conversation about some are in opposition to what we're doing anyway. And that's just part of the course. Hopefully over the next few years, we won't see those things coming through the courts, which is what we want to see, that we'll see so few of them that it won't really matter that much. But leading up to that, that's 700,000 people that we got to contend with. Remember, the expungement process is set to, there's phases of it, which is, I don't have with me, but it goes all the way out to 2025. So there are groups of expungements that will take place that will lead from now to 2025, because it's 700,000 people. It's a lot of people that are impacted by this that will need some assistance along the way. We have time for 2 more questions.
I just wanted to make sure you make the point about who the stakeholders were at the table. I think it's fascinating to realize who all comes to the table in a situation like this, who has to get a piece of the pie. And then secondly, the things like, once it's legal, it should be legal. Like, I can't be told how many number of broccoli plants I can buy, because if it's legal, then it's legal. So just sort of driving home the point of where your discontent arose.
I think that's part of the controversy. That's the push and pull. I was always in support of legalization since 2004. The devil is in the details, though. What kind of legalization rollout will you have? We're hoping for the most successful rollout, but in the interim, We had law enforcement at the table that was interested. We had circuit clerks at the table, and a lot of people got their budget hands in there, and they go like, you're going to make this money, and we should get a piece of the pie, which happened across the board, believe it or not. But we had to make sure that we were protecting the interests of the people of the state of Illinois, and ultimately, I didn't get the bill that I wanted, which is part of the legislative process. I don't believe either it's legal or it's not. And that creates its own problems. As Brian just identified, we will have other ancillary problems that come as a result of legalization because, oh yeah, we didn't think about what was going to happen with HR, and what about the liquor establishments? You know, the people on the ground know the reality of this stuff. Sometimes we don't see all of those pieces, and we may miss those as we're trying to do something good. It may still result sometimes in a couple of things that we didn't intend, those unintended consequences. So we do still have those to contend with. We will contend with them, and we're prepared to contend with them as they come up. And we hope that those who still are getting revenue from this will use it for its best purposes, use it for research, use it for providing opportunity in communities for redevelopment and re-education for communities who are devastated by the impacts of the war on drugs, and not for the increase in DUIs, not for the increase in traffic stops. We don't want those kind of things to be the results, but when they show their heads, we will be prepared for the reform that's necessary. And I'll take Courtney last.
Last night or the night before. So let me understand, even though it's legalized in the state of Illinois, each town is able to decide whether they will allow these businesses in their town. Because I saw Paxton, I know St. Joe, and I work with all these people. But it's just not because it's legal, anybody can go and open one. It has to be a town thing that says, okay.
The towns still get to set zoning. Zoning is done by local governments, and that's an important thing. And I agree with it. I served on the city and the county level, and so zoning is important to those local communities. I want to know where I want this establishment to be because it's going to impact my communities. And so any community that does not want to have dispensaries in their community, they have that right to make that decision. And I think it's a good decision for them to weigh in on this. When we had our conversations in Champaign-Urbana, I reached out to the mayors that I represent in these areas, even those who I don't come to those events, because it is important for them to know up front what this means for their communities, but it also means that there are revenue enhancements that you won't participate in, but that's a trade-off that the city council or the village body has to decide. It is up to them, and so we'll have to leave it with them. Thank you all so much for enjoying this conversation with me and so many great questions. If you have others that we did not cover here tonight, you're welcome to contact our office, which is very easy to get to. We're between 4th. You can walk to my office from here. We're between 4th and 5th on University Avenue. We do welcome you to come there. We also welcome you to participate with us in what we called our panels. Our panels start up we run according to the semester of the university. We track our panels that way. It is really made up of people just like you who are interested in law, in education, in K through 12, in environment, in agriculture, whatever your interest area. Volunteers literally come in and they work with us through bills, and we review hundreds of bills every single session. We also write and introduce our own legislation right here from Champaign-Urbana. So we draft here, we introduce in Springfield, we do our advocacy work together. Anybody who might be slightly interested in knowing what our panels do, go to my website, which is staterepcarolammons.com, just staterepcarolammons.com, and look on that website and say, is there a panel where my expertise could be useful? We have all kinds of teachers and educational and physicists and agriculturists and whatever policy area. We can introduce a marijuana panel if you want to track the implementation of this. I'm open to what people would like to do. Our office allows them to meet right in our space, and we do it twice a week on different panels, different topics. And we welcome your participation, and we really need it because there's thousands of bills that we review right here from our own district. So thank you all so much for giving me your time and attention.